Welcome, everyone. It is episode 71 of the Mindful Marketer live stream. I'm Lisa Norell. I'm your host today. Great to see you. We had well over 100 people sign up for this session today. So clearly, brand ROI for marketing skeptics is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts right now. So we're going to dive in a moment to the topic. And while you're joining, make sure you tell us where you are from in the chat, because we're very, very happy that you're here. Let me start with a few introductions and announcements. We have not been letting moss grow under our feet over here at Energized Growth. And there are some things we've been working on to bring greater value and fulfill our mission of helping mindful leaders cultivate healthier companies. So let me tell you a couple of things that are coming up. The first is that raising your game as a marketing leader, as a growth leader, is more important than ever. Between the challenges in the economy, the post-pandemic workforce, interest rates growing, and of course, the disruptive nature of generative AI, now is the time to secure your community and be more confident in your growth. We have two ways you can engage in our communities, and one of those ways is through the Marketing Growth Leaders community. We don't want you to climb alone. So if you're interested in more information, or you just want to ask a few questions about how our members outpace their competition and grow their careers with greater confidence, drop us a line. The second thing I want to tell you is we have also just put together our agenda for our 7th CMOs Leading Innovation Conference coming up November 2nd and 3rd in Nashville, Music City, Tennessee. I cannot wait. And just to give you a flavor, November 2nd and 3rd, a flavor of what we do at our conferences, here is a recent comment from the head of growth marketing at CoStar Group, Jeannie Gallardo.
I think the biggest thing I learned is just be open and network and learn from others who have already done it. And that's what really Click brings to the table. The second thing, and actually I'm a huge proponent of this, but data. Use data. Let data tell your story. And that really is my mission of what I'm trying to build at CoStar. Lisa is one of the most authentic and genuine people I have met. So I recommend her 100% plus infinity. And then the Click event is equal. It is really a unique place where you can meet other marketing leaders in a safe, open, transparent place.
I'm blushing a little bit. Yeah, she's a wonderful participant in Click. So let's talk about the other quick announcement, and then we're going to bring our wonderful guest to the stage. I was just featured last week on the cover of HBR.org. My newest article just came out, 3 Ways Companies Get Customer Experience Wrong. So if you are in the middle of wanting to increase net value per customer, build stronger loyalty and relationships with your customers, and you want to learn about the connection between your employee experience and your customer experiences, I hope you'll get a copy of the article. And now on to our show. You know, we are in this era of efficiency, thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, where demand gen rules and brand budgets often will get short shrift. So if you are a marketing leader or a CEO trying to persuade your board that brands matter, how do you tame those brand skeptics? How do you demonstrate the value of your brand and investing in your brand going forward? I've brought together today 2 great brand champions from very different industries and perspectives. Katie Holler joining us from Charlottesville, Virginia. She is the Vice President of Marketing at Clutch.co, which is a global online marketplace. And prior to that, she worked at some high growth companies that built great brands, including Cvent, Capterra, and Gartner. in beautiful Charlottesville, Virginia. She and her husband also own a turkey farm. And our other guest today is joining us from the Toronto area. Michael Oliver is the head of his own creative direction and strategy firm. Prior to that, most recently, he was with BMW Canada in their head of marketing. He and his sons, as I learned, are hockey fanatics. So let's welcome our Canadian and our Virginian, Katie and Michael. Glad to see you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Michael. So maybe we should do a little level set first before we dive into the questions. We're getting comments and questions already, in fact. Todd is here. Disha is here. We're very happy to see that. And thank you, Disha. Thank you very much for your support, Todd. And all of us listening to this, we want you to first, going into this, know that some of the metrics and the tools that we're going to talk about today will be very relevant to you, but others may not be, based on where you are in your growth. So one of my fellow 100 coaches members, Alex Osteralder, says that you got to know where you are in your growth. One place you might be is in exploit mode. Both of you have worked for some very good brands and still do, where you have a current, very successful business, right? So you've got some basic questions, but not too many about your business model because it's working. But some of us joining today might be in explore mode versus that exploit your brand mode, where you may not really know how your business model should look and what your brand really stands for, and you don't yet know its value. What kind of companies have both of you worked for, and where do you think we should start?
I'll go first. As you mentioned in the intro, I've had a variety of different experiences, both at big global brands, BMW Group being most recent, but also I've worked agency side with a lot of small to medium-sized agencies doing creative strategy, digital strategy for brands. So I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had about the difference between the big global brand and the marketing challenges that exist there, and some of the smaller startups as well.
Yes. And Katie, have you lived in both worlds, both the exploit and well as the explore?
Absolutely. Yes. So I started my career at a similarly very small word of mouth agency, which was just kind of right at the advent of when social media was starting to become part of the mainstream conversation around how we go to market. And I think that through that experience, had that kind of foundational part of my career, really understanding how do you establish the role of brand, both for the agency as we were just starting up in a pretty small business, but also with some of the bigger brands that we were working with. And then throughout my career, have had the opportunity to be in kind of early stage startups and go through that growth period. And we're in a high growth period right now with Clutch. So on that journey of, from the foundation we've set, how does the brand need to evolve, and how does that story need to change as you continue to grow as a business?
Great. Well, then let's dive in based on where we are right now. What are you seeing as the biggest challenge that any marketer is facing when they get into a brand value discussion based on our crazy economy right now?
So, Lisa, you mentioned the HBR article, and congratulations on that. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I think that the topic that you touched on is what I see as one of the biggest challenges today for brands, for companies to really lead brand discussions and brand value, and that is experience. Brand equals experience today, and answering the question, does every customer touch point align with your brand values, is a very difficult thing to do. In many cases, depending on the structure of the organization, you may not have the remit as a marketer to affect things like customer service, to affect things like roadside assistance if we're talking about an automotive OEM, for example. So really understanding where your remit exists and how to affect and create impact in some of these other areas of the business are very, very challenging, because as we know, customers define brands today. Your customer's perception of your brand is really the reality. It's not what you say, it's what your customers believe and what they say to others. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, really tapping into experience and as a marketer, having influence in some of these other parts of the business.
How about you, Katie?
Yeah, I think today in the landscape that we're currently in, I mean, the importance of brand is prevalent for a lot of different reasons. It's almost been a perfect storm in the last couple of years coming out of the pandemic, where we have, the high growth that we experienced through that, certainly in the tech industry where I've spent a lot of my career, and a lot of different factors at play for marketers to kind of defend why does brand need to be at the forefront of the conversation. And I think a few of those right now, as we see tightening budgets and pulling back in the current kind of economic conditions in the tech sector, the research has borne out that the brands that lean into investment and continuing to market and really establish themselves through those periods of disruption end up growing at a far faster pace coming out of those periods. So I think that kind of strategic piece is important to get across right now when every dollar is coming into question, as you set up. And at the same time, we're facing like really big disruptions from the ways we've traditionally gone to market, as digital privacy regulations are coming into the major media networks that we use to market and reach our audiences. That's becoming more. I know you had an episode a few weeks ago on the death of the cookie and how that's changing advertising. So there's just a lot of factors at play that I think is making the urgency of kind of establishing this narrative of why investing in brand right now is so important. And I think all of those factors are putting this kind of the top of my mind, certainly. And I think for a lot of my peers, it's increasingly important in this moment.
And kind of combining what both of you said, we have these forces fighting one another. All of the things you just said, Katie, around the cookies and the content and the privacy, coupled with the post-pandemic realities that customers want to be treated differently. Each one of us is going through different social, financial, and metaphysical moments right now. And so that imposes very different expectations on all of our ideal customer audiences of how they want to be treated. And, one thing that I think hasn't changed is that your company's market capitalization can, on average, increase or decrease by 20% based on your brand value. And that data come from a company out of the UK called Brand Finance. So we'll put all of those research firms in the show notes. So if any CEO listening or board member is going, brand soft stuff doesn't matter, let's just pile on all our marketing dollars into demand gen, you are sorely mistaken. You are sorely mistaken. So, and just ask like a company like Coca-Cola, where upwards of $71 billion of their market capitalization is attributed to their brand. Who can argue with that? Anyway, let's jump in. What are you doing right now, given the generative AI hype cycle, to, in your case, Michael, to help your clients make sure that it doesn't destroy their brand or that it could amplify their brand? And Katie, in your case, with the marketplace you have so well developed, how's that impacting?
The impact is absolutely profound at the moment. There's no doubt that AI is changing a lot of things when it comes to marketing, when it comes to brand management, communication in general. I think the biggest thing that I'm talking about with folks today is the bravery that it takes to be in the business of promoting and marketing a brand today. With the tools that exist to literally open source a brand to the general public and make creators out of everyone, I think brand managers have to be extremely brave in the way that they look at their brand parameters, their brand guidelines, and really embrace this idea of an open source brand. It's already been like that in the Web 2.0 stage where customer sentiment and interactions on social media have really formed a big part of the way that brands are perceived today. But you mentioned Coca-Cola a moment ago. That's a great example of a company that has embraced this idea of open sourcing their brand and created a campaign called Create Real Magic, where they basically give permission to fans of the brand to remix and reimagine some of their iconic ads from over the years, using AI to generate different and varied versions of some of these iconic pieces of communication. So I think it's a great example, Coca-Cola. I'm glad that you brought it up because it was really top of mind for me, thinking about how to look at some of the tools that exist today and really embrace them.
Well, I just felt this big sigh of relief in my body because that being the case, it's telling me that as we look to the future for marketing leaders, it's not all on our shoulders to come up with the best brand possible or the best ROI model. It's almost like you're saying they crowdsourced it, right? To find out
Absolutely.
what matters to them. So that becomes part of your narrative to the board for a critical investment in brand.
Embrace the idea that there are very different interpretations of what your brand is. And I think the more engagement that you promote using tools like generative AI as an example to engage your fan base, I think the more value you'll see downstream.
Yes,
That's fun.
Build on that sentiment. I mean, I think everyone right now is feeling the disruption that generative AI is causing and the pace at which this is being adopted across industries, across different consumer types. And so I think that while it is, very much a period of kind of rethinking the traditional ways we've thought about brand and how we can leverage this technology, it's really shaking up and providing a lot of opportunities similar to what Michael just shared around, how can we, I think for those of us who've spent a lot of time in brand teams, we do a lot of work in reading customer sentiment analysis, understanding the themes, understanding what the customer thinks about our brands, and that this technology can do that in a second, right? And so our team already has started to look at tools where we can accelerate that learning internally and leverage the generative AI to quickly kind of synthesize, ideate, help us refine our ideas. And I think that creates a lot more space for teams to accelerate the work that is really impactful in creating a strong brand and carving out time for that real true human creativity, which this technology realistically is not going to replace, right? And so it is only as effective as the prompts that we are able to give it. And so I'm really excited about what this can do because I think it takes away a lot of that manual processing, even as we think about the ROI, a lot of times that's media mix modeling and lift analysis, and some of the predictive analytics capabilities of this technology can kind of automate a lot of that, right? So if we're not spending our time on that kind of behind the scenes work, that this frees us up to do that really impactful brand building work that's going to actually move the needle. And it's not so much internal, reporting behind the scenes.
I heard a great quote, Katie. I completely agree with what you said. I heard a great quote recently that, there's a lot of talk about AI replacing jobs, and that may be the case in some circumstances. But the quote was, AI won't replace you, but someone who's using AI just might. And I think that's a very, very telling and very good way of thinking about this. It just sparked from what you just said, and I really agree with your sentiment there, Katie.
I love it. We always like to include some show notes of what we're learning. Are there any generative AI tools that either of you have seen in use vis-a-vis Coca-Cola or Katie, in your case, that have streamlined your ability to quickly define and justify the value of your brands?
In our case, I mean, I think we're still in very much a discovery phase there. So certainly we've tested ChatGPT itself and understanding the capabilities of what we can get from that. We've also explored some tools kind of more specific to marketing in the B2B space. Jasper AI is one that comes to mind that is really working on how do you train. It's built on OpenAI as well, but how do you train it to understand your brand voice and some of the kind of nuances within your team? So that's another one that we've experimented with. But I think, these technologies are launching every week at this point. And so we're still very open-minded to what those different capabilities might be.
Yes. Welcome to the hype cycle. Right. And I'm just excited because they are going to create so many new jobs and so many new product services for marketers to use. So it'll be fun. Anyway, but we're not here to talk about marketing tools that use generative AI. That's like a whole other show and times 30. But anyway, I'd love to have you share with us what you have used, Katie, at clutch.co to measure brand value. What are some of the metrics that our audience should consider if they're already in exploit mode, where they have a brand, they have customers, they know their value proposition?
Yeah, so I think some of these carry over, even if you are in that kind of exploratory phase where you're still defining what it is. And so for us, we're an online marketplace of business services. So we help connect business leaders around the globe to the right business service providers and help them find, the right partners to help them scale their business. And so for us, there's really two sides to the marketplace. There's business leaders like ourselves who are looking for agency partners, looking for services, and they come to our site to then read reviews, explore the different opportunities, and connect with those providers. And then we have the vendor side of the marketplace, which is the actual service providers listed there. And so for us, a lot of the metrics that matter and how we measure that brand is how are those buyers discovering Clutch and how are they coming to the site? And so it's looking at some of the basic things that even in very early stage startups I've been a part of, I think are the leading indicators of the health of your brand. And so that's things like direct traffic to the site, branded searches, are they coming to your storefront, which our website is, and do they know our brand? Are they retaining that? As we've kind of grown and as we are investing heavily in building this brand, we're introducing some of these exploit, to use your language, type metrics that I think become more valuable once you have some market share to really benchmark against. So things like aided and unaided awareness, as we launch new campaigns in market, understand kind of incrementality of test versus control audiences to see how is some of our campaigns actually lifting that brand awareness, lifting that direct traffic, even some things like how did you hear about us surveys on the vendor side of the marketplace, where we actually have a connection with those service providers. Is we understand, how they're discovering us. So much of the last few years of marketing, I think, have been very focused on this attribution modeling and last click. How do we see where they last came from? And the reality is, we all know as consumers of many different brands and services that we are exposed to them through lots of different channels that does not get reflected in those last click analytics. And so really hearing from the customers, and I think that's a benefit we have in the B2B space, is ask them, where did you hear about us and what do they attribute to that? And I think that can really demonstrate the actual tactics and the investments that are driving that revenue growth.
Thank you. That's helpful. Michael, let's play off that for a minute. And I want to hear, in your years with BMW Canada, which of those metrics did you also use, or which were one or two others that were much more important? Because you're both B2B and B2C.
Correct. Yeah, there was a wide variety of different metrics that were measured on an ongoing basis, both during campaign in-market periods and also on an ongoing basis. Without getting super technical, one of the things I can say that was always a big focus for the organization globally is brand health at a macro level, and our brand's health versus some of the competition and some of the emerging competition with regards to new vehicle offerings and electric vehicles in general. So a broad vision across a lot of different metrics around awareness, around strength, around appeal of the brand across a certain variety of different touch points and different types of metrics. This was a big focus, I think, for the organization, and continues to be for all automotive OEMs. I think one of the things that I would add on to what Katie said is really the attribution, attribution modeling and understanding where leads are coming from was a big focus for my team over the past couple of years. But one of the big areas that we have tried to really focus on in those 2 years is understanding our relationship to sales results directly. So really looking for metrics that help connect things that are in market to things that are happening at the retail level in the retail stores, and building connections across our national communications and our regional tactical communications down to the retail level. So a wide variety of metrics there, really looking at new technologies as well to start understanding store visits and attributing store visits to exposure to campaigns. This is an area that was always of keen interest, I think, for the industry in general, and it is one that I see continuing to be a hot topic.
I want to pause for a minute there. I know we've got a question coming in from someone. Just so I'm clear on that, Michael, did you look for correlation between the sales, the brand efforts and sales results, or did you see direct causation?
I think correlation is a better way to describe it, and I think that's a fairly standard way of looking at how some of the metrics that we would look at in the automotive space would be considered. One of the things that I think is very interesting is that the purchase cycle can be quite lengthy, and so the amount of time it takes before you're converted to an actual owner or a customer varies depending on a lot of different factors. But one thing is for sure, that is a very digital journey, and it's a very customer-centric journey at the moment that they are in control. They have the information that they need. They're very much in the driver's seat, literally and figuratively, when it comes to the purchase of a new vehicle. So I think finding those correlations between effort and investment in market across different tiers of advertising and what's actually happening at the retail level, thankfully a very strong relationship between national sales company and retail network exists, so that a lot of that data and insight is free flowing, and you can understand what's actually going on at the retail level.
Very nice point in time, and very good episodic data to support why brands matter and why it's time to invest. Well, we had a question come in from Marisol from Atlanta, Georgia, and she is a seasoned CMO and now almost a full-time board member. So let's hear what Marisol's question was for us. Let's see. Marisol, she says, here's a real great popcorn question for both of you. Can you please provide practical advice on any fast brand equity building tactics?
So I'll start here. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, do not count the quality of your website. And I think really starting there as kind of that is the place where modern buyers discover products and services. And so I think that's one of the places where, when I think about building brand, that's kind of like securing your home base and focusing there. I think that's one of the fastest ways to really make sure that your story is clear, that buyers understand the value proposition and what they get out of this product. And then I think from there, making sure that story is reflected across other tactics. But I think if you start with some of the outbound advertising, and then they get to the point of transaction, in our case, it is a website, but it may be an actual retail store, to Michael's example, and that story isn't aligned, that's kind of a waste, right? So I think starting where the transaction takes place is my always kind of fast tactic to see improvement right away.
Thank you, and congratulations on your recent relaunch of your website, Katie. I know it's laborious and can be tedious, but you did it. And Michael, how about you? What's one quick practical piece of advice?
I think in order to get an organization focused on brand collectively, one of the things that I've tried to do in a number of different roles is focus on the internal audience. So your colleagues, your associates, your teammates, and make sure that everybody shares a very similar version of what the brand is, what it stands for, and what its values are. And that's separate from an employer brand. Those two things are both important, but I think the public facing consumer definition of what your brand is should be something every person in your organization can quote. And I think the way you do that, there's a lot of different strategies to do that, but it really, for me, starts when you onboard new associates onto your team and making sure that they have a clear picture of what it is that they've bought into, and that they become from day one brand champions who can speak about brand values confidently and really elevate the importance of brand in every single role, not just those of the marketing team.
Great advice there. Now, this is called our rapid fire moment. I'm going to flip the table here and ask Katie, your favorite B2C brand that you consider high value right now in your life.
I was prepared with my B2B example. So I think from a B2C standpoint, one brand I'll call to that I'm a big fan of is Stitch Fix. I think they've done a really great job of going back to our earlier conversation around AI. They've created kind of an interaction with the customer around personalizing the experience. And that's something that I've personally really appreciated, that customized matching of your style to your personality and being able to kind of represent yourself effectively.
Thank you.
I appreciated that.
All right, flipping again to Michael now, your favorite B2B brand right now, and a couple sentences on why.
I think I would have to say AWS is one of my very favorites. And part of the reason why I think they've done such a good job in sort of introducing their brand and selling it, it's an enabler of really amazing things. And probably a number of the viewers and listeners will have seen recent campaigns from AWS talking about what that technology empowers and all of the amazing things you and your family or you and your friends can experience as a result of the AWS platform and all of the services it provides. So I think that's been a real standout for me. And personally, I use a number of the products and services that are powered by that technology. So I can say as an actual customer and user, it's very much appreciated and a part of my day-to-day.
I love it. You talk about all across the spectrum, from women's fashion to massive server farms that power our e-commerce world. I mean, it's crazy, right?
It is.
So it's not all about food and beverage companies that get all the glory. So, well, thank you both very, very much for being with us today. I'd love to have you back here again when we escape the Chat GPT or the generative AI hype cycle to see what the nature of brands are and how that technology has helped companies build stronger brands and avoid destroying their current brand. I wish you both a glorious weekend, and thanks for your contributions to our community.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much, Lisa.
Bye, everybody. We'll make sure that we put Katie and Michael's great ideas in the show notes, both for the podcast as well as for the live stream. I always have my mindful moments because we're coming up on our wrap up. My gosh, my producer, Marissa, my head is about to explode. We covered so many great ideas today and so many great resources from Michael and Katie. I'm picking three. One is look at what Coca-Cola is doing to leverage generative AI to crowdsource their brand with their customers. Can you imagine that? I think old traditional agencies should be worried right now. I really do. And the second one is look for correlations of your brand ROI with sales results, with in-store visits or on website visits. Katie brought up a great idea there on, your website being your store visit, perhaps if you're a B2B company. And third, make your home base your website as the first place to consider your brand showing its true value. And Michael showing that your first visit and of brand value needs to be with the onboarding or retention of your best and your people in general. So those are three of my mindful moments from today. Oh my gosh. Love spending time with all of you today. Marisol, thanks for joining. Faze, Disha, Todd, many others. And we're going to be back here. Don't miss out on the May show because we're going to have Abhinav Kumar joining us from the Netherlands, from Tata Consulting. He is the CMO. His team of 475 amazing marketers have brought some great wisdom to him over the years on communication strategies. We're going to continue on communication strategies that every marketer needs to understand to grow their career and their customers. So I'll see you again in May. Make it a beautiful spring weekend. I'm going to go volunteer tomorrow at the Flower and Garden Show and teach children about the wildlife of our county and meet some friends along the way. See you all in May.